Good evening. It's been an action-packed day. The UK voted but did not decide who should run the government. As one headline put it, Theresa maybe. The acting Prime Minister is trying to cobble up a coalition after her Conservative Party lost clear majority in Parliament, putting a question mark on May's political future and the Brexit talks that were scheduled to begin in 10 days from now. The election has thrown up some interesting trends as well, including the massive turnout of young voters and the record number of British Indian parliamentarians this time. On Gravitas tonight, we decode the numbers and analyse the trends to bring you the big picture. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, the headlines this Friday. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping meet on the sidelines of the SCO summit at Astana. Modi signals a thaw in the relations post the Obor differences, thanks China for the SCO membership. Supreme Court orders a partial stay on the Aadhaar PAN card link. For those without an Aadhaar card, it is not mandatory to file income tax returns. More pressure on Pakistan after ISIS claims responsibility for killing 2 Chinese workers kidnapped last month in Balochistan. Beijing had pulled up Islamabad for failing to ensure security of CPEC workers. And the Qatar crisis worsens. Arab states put Qataris and the Muslim Brotherhood in a terror blacklist. Reports say Turkey will send troops and warplanes. Doha urges Washington to mediate. And as always, some specials for you on the show. An exclusive interview with the new Prime Minister of Nepal, Sher Bahadur Deuba. And the fallout of the Comey testimonies. The American deep state out to get their president. We'll discuss that. But first to what happened in Britain. Prime Minister Theresa May was delivered a stunning blow by voters. She has fallen short of a clear majority. The Labour, in contrast, did spectacularly well, prompting Jeremy Corbyn to call for Theresa May's resignation. She's ruled that out for now. Here's a report.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a government.
The gamble that failed. British Prime Minister Theresa May was licking her wounds after voters punished her, denying her the mandate she sought to negotiate Brexit.
This government will guide the country through the crucial Brexit talks that begin in just 10 days and deliver on the will of the British people by taking the United Kingdom out of the European Union.
Although the Conservative Party emerged the single largest with 318 seats, there's still uncertainty over forming a government in coalition with the other parties. There's even more uncertainty over whether Theresa May is the right person for the job. On the street, opinion was divided.
I think Theresa May's got to resign. You know, she's gone backwards now. The gamble didn't pay off, and I think they'll ask for a delay in the Brexit to ask to trigger Article 50. So we just seem to be going backwards now.
I'm relieved because for a woman who changes her mind a lot, she promises a lot of stability, and I think it's only by being held to account that we're going to get that stability.
I don't know. She's going to have to resign, is she not? I would think. But who they get into bed with, I don't know.
The opposition Labour Party overcame doubts and criticism of their leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and grabbed 261 seats, a gain of 29 seats.
Incredible result for the Labour Party because people voted for hope. Young people and old people all came together yesterday. Very high turnout, huge increase in the Labour vote, and they did it because they want to see things done differently and they want hope in their lives. We put on more than 3 million votes yesterday.
The result has deepened divides over Brexit. Negotiations with Europe are set to begin in a week's time. It has renewed speculation about another election to sort out this mess created by Theresa May. Bureau Report, WION.
And Theresa May is making a statement as we speak. Let's listen in.
Through. That's what I'm doing, forming a government. I obviously wanted a different result last night, and I'm sorry for all those colleagues who lost their seats, who didn't deserve to lose. And of course, I'll reflect on what happened.
Just very briefly, if I may, some of your MPs are calling for staff changes. Will there be staff changes?
Well, what I'm doing today is focusing on forming a government. As I say, I think that's important in the national interest. And as the largest party with the most seats and most votes, we're the only party that can form that government to take this forward. I'll shortly be forming my cabinet, and obviously there'll be further ministerial posts, and other personnel issues are for other days.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
So that's the latest statement from the acting Prime Minister, who says that she's ready to form a government. With us this evening, Emil Gesson, former Royal Marines Commando, with us from Manchester, Mandy Clark, our London Bureau Chief, and Ryan Chakrabarti, a lawyer and UK resident who is in the studio with me. Good evening to everyone. Mandy, let me start with you. And the news that some channels and some websites in the UK are carrying that she has decided and declared that she is going to form a minority government. Right, I'm told we've lost the link there, but that's what we're picking up right now, that in the wake of this hung poll verdict, the Conservatives may have tied up with a few other parties and are looking at forming a minority government. That's what Theresa May also declared after meeting the Queen earlier today. So while we look at what's happening and the ongoing developments there in London, Ryan Chakrabarti, you've been watching this election and the results from afar. Were you surprised it's being called a shock verdict?
Well, it's quite fascinating that the way the result has panned out today. I think obviously over the last 2 or 3 weeks we've been seeing that sway away from the Tories. A hung parliament, in my view, is perhaps the worst of the possible outcomes because it's a decisive victory for neither. And that, at the current stage of discussions of Brexit, is not good for the United Kingdom. As I mentioned in an earlier interview today, I think it was inevitable that Theresa May would fight off claims to resign. She was still able to form a minority government. She went to the Democratic Ulster Unionist Party. And again, they will form, I think, a minority government. And I think we're going to see, I think what's going to be interesting is to see what concessions she will need to make in order to keep that coalition together. The Unionists, no doubt, will be, in particular, looking at Brexit and wishing to maintain that porous border with Ireland. And I think, obviously, in that respect, Theresa May's cards at the negotiating table at Brexit are going to be compromised.
Absolutely. And Giles Kerringham, former Director of Communications of the Conservative Party, is perhaps the best place to tell us what's going on in his party. Giles, we've heard that that there have been some sort of an announcement about the formation of a minority government. Tell us what you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's been a devastating result for the Conservative Party. There's no other way of framing this. It's been a disastrous night. You know, we've gone from a majority government to a minority government. And now she's going to have an unofficial arrangement with the DUP to deal with policies on a one-by-one basis. But really, I think she's now on borrowed time. I don't think she'll be Prime Minister this time next year. Her authority has been fatally undermined by the election result.
And she is facing an uncertain political future. Is she going to retain her leadership of the party?
I think, you know, in the short term, yes. In the long term, no. I think also it does throw the whole future of what happens with Brexit into doubt. But she's severely weakened. She hasn't got a majority. She hasn't got a huge, very deep base of support in the party. So I think now she's almost a caretaker leader. And I think, you know, she certainly won't be leading the Tories into the next election. And I wonder if this time next year, whether she will still be Prime Minister.
Mandy, what are you picking up? What's happening? What sort of maneuvers, political maneuvers, negotiations are on right now?
Well, certainly that there's going to be a lot of front. She lost some of her front benches. Some of her colleagues didn't win back their seats, so the cabinet is going to have to be reshuffled. I think that's the focus now. But she is battered. She is bruised. She will continue to be Prime Minister for the foreseeable future, but it doesn't seem like her career is going to last as long as that 5-year term. So there has been a lot of chatter about if there is going to be another runoff about a leader. Will she step down, and will there be another leadership run? So it just puts more uncertainty and more instability in the UK, and that's exactly the opposite of what her campaign was all about.
Right, and I'll come back to who might be her successor in the party and eventually in the government. But let me bring in Emil Gessen here. Emil, when you saw the numbers, the final figures, what was your first reaction today?
I was quite shocked, actually. And Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party fans at the moment are out there celebrating because it has been a big defeat for Theresa May. However, Jeremy Corbyn, he hasn't won the war, but he has definitely won the battle on this one. And at the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty and people want to know what's going to go on. But at the moment, a lot of people are looking towards Theresa May. Is she going to stand down or is she going to remain? But personally, I think after David Cameron standing down after Brexit and her meeting the Queen and speaking with the DUP, I think she's going to remain for the time being, especially since Brexit talks only 10 days away. So I think for the short term, she will remain. But same as everyone else is saying, I don't think she'll last 5 years.
Will the Brexit talks go on as scheduled, Mandy? As Emil pointed out, just 10 days away, but given the political scenario in Britain, are they looking at postponing it?
Well, certainly that's not what Theresa May is saying. She came out and said it's a critical time to remain on schedule and keep stability. So she made it sound like she will go ahead in 10 days' time and start those Brexit negotiations. Of course, she won't be focused on those negotiations right now. She's going to be very much focused on forming on that cabinet and forming the new government. So it's not an ideal way to walk into what will be very, very tough negotiations. And this is all playing into the hand of the EU. They're aware that she doesn't have a strong mandate going into these negotiations.
Giles, our panel this morning threw up some names, including that of Home Secretary Rudd as a possible replacement or successor of Theresa May. What are you picking up?
I think the front runners at the moment are Amber Rudd, Boris Johnson, and possibly David Davis. I think more likely if you have a runoff, it will be Amber Rudd versus Boris Johnson. The one other thing to throw into the mix here is, though, that Amber Rudd only just got her seat back in Parliament. She won with a very, very slim majority. So the question is, could she be Prime Minister with such a slim majority in her seat? But, nevertheless, she had a great campaign. She's a good TV performer. She's been a good Home Secretary, and she's certainly one to watch. Obviously, Boris, has always been touted as a favourite. So, yeah, I think those are the two to watch. And I think, it'll be very interesting to see how things play out over the next 2-3 days. She's doing a cabinet reshuffle this afternoon. She hasn't got much room to manoeuvre at all. And I expect that you'll probably see many of the same familiar people getting their old jobs back.
Right. Mandy, one of the voters described this as Theresa May shooting herself in the foot after having called these early elections, and the knives are out in her party for her. What are the names that you've heard of possible replacements?
Very similar names. Amber Rudd and Boris Johnson are very popular names that we've heard as replacement. David Davis is well known, and he's been there quite a while, and he's seen as steady and stable. But those are really the three names that have appeared. Of course, it's very, very early. The results came out this morning, so it's all to play for. And certainly she hasn't signaled that she's stepping down, but it looks that she doesn't have long in her premiership left because she's in such a weakened state. So those are certainly the top names that are coming into focus at the minute, but we won't see. I think we'll start to see political manoeuvring at this point because, Nigel will be out for Theresa May.
Ryan, what is the public sentiment? Is it what Jeremy Corbyn said, that she's not only lost the vote, but also the mandate and the confidence of the people and should step down? Is that what people at large feel?
Well, I think it's a fair point to make that to a certain extent she's lost the moral authority to rule. Though having said that, although Jeremy Corbyn had the campaign of a lifetime, let's not forget that this time last year after Brexit, he was vilified by his own parliamentary party to resign. David Cameron, outgoing Prime Minister at the time just after Brexit, pillared him across the dispatch box, saying that, in the national interest, for God's sake, man, resign. Jeremy Corbyn, to his credit, has stuck at it, pulled off a remarkable about-face and a storming campaign. But that aside, Labour just don't have the numbers. They could never have put together a minority government because they would have needed all the other minority parties in Parliament in order to get to 326. So I think that how the cards have fallen is inevitable.
Right. Giles, to what do you attribute this remarkable turnaround for Jeremy Corbyn and the way his campaign has performed and impressed, I'm told, young voters largely?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. One, there were very low expectations on him at the start, and he defied expectations. But secondly, Labour had they had an effective manifesto which came out with some good retail policies. They talked about scrapping tuition fees for students, which was incredibly popular. They were very effective at energising and mobilising and getting out the young vote. And traditionally in the UK, the young vote doesn't necessarily go to the polls. So they got that young vote out, and that certainly helped them get a good share of the vote. I think conversely with the Conservatives, they had a manifesto which didn't have a big retail offer to the voters. It was uncosted, and the one big policy in there, which was about social care, was incredibly controversial, very polarising, and they U-turned on it after 3 or 4 days. And by U-turning on it, they undermined the key central core message of their campaign, which was that Theresa May was offering strong, stable leadership. And also, I think the other problem is that Theresa May didn't emotionally connect with the voters. The more they saw of her, ultimately, the less they liked.
Emil, we've spoken about the election under the shadow of 3 terror attacks in 3 months. Whether you agree or not with what she did, Theresa May at least had a record in government. As Home Secretary, she was seen as tough. The kind of support we've seen for Jeremy Corbyn is surprising because he doesn't have any record. So if people are thinking about national security, why are they going for this man?
I don't think anyone went to the polls really to vote Jeremy Corbyn in for security. We know his stance on several national security and international foreign policies. So like your last speaker was saying there, I think the majority of the voters who went for Jeremy Corbyn were a lot younger. It was to do with tuition fees and also the U-turns from Conservatives. And in the time of the terrorist attacks, when the public were looking for a strong leader, I don't personally feel Theresa May actually provided that to the public. Towards the end, she was tough talking, but overall, her stance and the fact is that she was a Home Secretary before has gone against her. And has Jeremy Corbyn won, or has Theresa May lost it? Is the problem at the moment is, how did this happen? Why did so many people go towards Jeremy Corbyn when they didn't expect it? Because at the moment, her stance and her leadership stance, people are looking at it and questioning Theresa May, can she actually remain?
Mandy, was it in a way a backlash vote for the younger voters who did not come out in very large numbers for the Brexit referendum and wanted to make their voice heard and wanted to send out a message?
It could be possibly that. Certainly, Labour resonated with the younger vote. And Theresa May refused to do a lot of TV appearances. She refused to go on Radio 2 and 4. These are big stations that have lots of listeners. She just wouldn't necessarily engage on the platforms that leaders expected her to, or the public would expect her to. And Jeremy Corbyn did the opposite. He did come out and he went on lots of talk shows and made radio appearances. And so it felt in many ways that she was hiding behind slogans. And the few times she made those appearances, she did appear robotic and stick to those lines. She didn't seem natural. She didn't engage. And I think when the public can't connect with the leader, that's where you see this dissatisfaction. And Jeremy Corbyn is a divisive character, but certainly he connects with the young. And also he's seen as anti-establishment. That has appealed to voters who don't often vote.
Right, and perception is very big in politics, Ryan. And Theresa May is someone who was seen as the adjectives used to describe her: unflappable, tough. Towards as polling day approached, it seems that she was being seen as someone who tends to give in to political exigencies, who was confused. Is that what cost her this election?
Well, I think it was more than that. It was her visual appearance. I think she looked wooden. I think she looked very rattled. Her inability to answer questions off the cuff, I thought, was very damaging for her. I think in one particular press conference, she was asked by a nurse as to why nurses hadn't had a pay rise in the public sector for the last 7 or 8 years. And the response she was rather stumped by how to respond. Words to the effect that money doesn't grow on trees and it's something that we're looking at. But this kind of thing just doesn't wash. It looks very wooden, and I think she disconnected with the public at large. And I think that, to a certain extent, was her downfall. I think also, and again, as some of your other panellists have mentioned, turning down a head-to-head debate with Jeremy Corbyn didn't make her look like the decisive, strong leader that she was painting herself out to be. I think that was also quite critical in hindsight.
Right. I'm going to request you all to stay with us. Let's quickly listen into what the voters have to say about this election's result.
Yeah, so, I mean, on a positive side, yeah, the DOP staunchly remain, but my problem is still that I see Theresa May being in charge as only a bad thing.
I think, if a minority government happens, then that's, it's disappointing, but it's not as bad as it could have been, and it's certainly not what the Conservatives expected. So that's, for me, I think that's a really good result.
I didn't really, believe in the Labour's policies that much. I kind of thought, they were pulling their policies out of the air and not really, backing up where they were going to get money to do stuff from. But I don't really like the situation now either, because now it's going to be harder for, Brexit talks to go ahead effectively. It's kind of made the UK look.
I think it's a fantastic thing for Britain. I think the mandate for a hard Brexit has disappeared. I think that's the most important thing to take away from last night. And that narrative is now in tatters, and I think that's a great thing.
So the young people participating is one of the interesting trends that emerged. The other, Emil, was that the SNP lost ground in Scotland. This is the area which wants to stay with the EU, is asking for a second referendum for independence. But the Tories seem to have gained there.
Yeah, the SNP didn't have a good night at all, and it's only a question of time when she's going to stand down up there. Alex Salmond losing his seat as well after all these years. Yeah, definitely Scotland has done a bit of a U-turn. But generally what we've seen with the seats that the Conservatives lost are generally areas that predominantly voted to remain in the EU. So when certain areas there, I don't think they went to Corbyn because they wanted Corbyn. I think they went as anti-Conservatives because they didn't want a hard Brexit. And this is what we're looking at now with the DUP involved. Is it going to be a hard Brexit or is it going to be a soft Brexit? And we don't know until we actually get to the negotiation table with them. But yeah, definitely in Scotland, a lot of people are quite shocked that the Conservatives actually won a lot more seats up there.
What happens to Brexit now, Giles?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I don't think she actually does have a mandate for a hard Brexit anymore. That was what was put on the table, and she didn't win a majority. I think it does make the negotiations very tricky. She hasn't got a clear mandate to go to Brussels. And clearly it's not in Brussels' interest to make it easy for the UK. So I think we're going to face quite a few rocky months. And really, by having a hung parliament, it really just fuels and adds to this climate of uncertainty.
Mandy, when this election was announced, it was believed that Brexit is going to be the focus. Then we started talking about national security and terror. Looking at the result, it seems people, the voters at least, were focusing on bread and butter issues, jobs, economy, a pay rise maybe.
Yeah, and you know, Britain has been in austerity for a long time, and it seemed a backlash against those deep cuts that have happened to the public service over the last few years while Britain has had this policy of austerity. So very much, you know, people voted about their lives, it seems. When I spoke to people out in the streets yesterday, one of the main things when I asked what matters the most, it wasn't necessarily terror or Brexit, it was the NHS or the state of the school systems. The NHS, the National Health Service here in the UK, has seen big cuts, and it has been seen to be in crisis for a long time. And they were really voting to put more money back into it. So that would be a Labour vote. So really, it's how the government affected them rather than the bigger issues.
And the other big headline, Ryan, is the record number of Indian origin British people who've made it to Parliament. 12?
I haven't looked at the figures, but I think that's great news to see that ethnic minorities in general are contributing to the British public debate, and that's obviously great news to see that many of them have got into Parliament.
Yes, whether it's a loss for Theresa May or a win for Jeremy Corbyn, the Indian Brits have scored a big number there. Giles, the pound nosedived this morning, falling by more than 2%. There is going to be this atmosphere of uncertainty, political uncertainty and economic uncertainty as well. Is Britain looking at a tougher period in that sense?
Well, I think this is the big challenge for us. How does she convey and communicate certainty in a very uncertain environment? And really that is now what she can do is really show she's getting on with the business of government. She needs to form a cabinet quickly. She needs to crack on and start with the Brexit negotiations. But also, crucially, I think she needs to show that she has a radical domestic agenda that she is following, so she can say to the public in the UK, but also to the rest of the world, we won't be solely defined by Brexit. But clearly, you know, she is facing a very, very difficult time.
Mandy, it's been a long day for you, and it's going to be a working weekend for most political leaders in the UK, I'm guessing, what with both the sides trying to look at their numbers and see where they stand.
Yeah, and likely lots of backdoor discussions about how to form this kind of loose coalition and also the cabinet. So, yeah, it's going to be lots of conversations you know, in the hallways in Parliament. We'll just have to see what shakes up. You know, it's going to be an interesting couple of days to see how this government is formed. The challenge for May is to form a strong government with having so few numbers, and also not a lot of support within her own party now. So it will be quite difficult. And of course, Labour is on the rise, even though they didn't take those numbers. They're seeming like a lot healthier party, a healthier opposition.
Right, we'll leave it at that, and of course we'll be tracking the developments in the UK with you, Mandy. Emil Gesson, Giles Kenningham, Ryan Chakrabarti, Mandy Clark, thank you all for joining us and for sharing your thoughts as we look at the numbers and what they mean for the UK and the world at large. The EU, of course, will be watching this very, very closely as they go into negotiations for the EU-Britain divorce, and those talks are expected to begin in about 10 days from now. We're going to take a break on that note. Still ahead on the show, a WION exclusive interview with the new Prime Minister of Nepal, Sher Bahadur Dewba. Do stay with us for that.